All right, looks like we got a pretty great crowd amassed here to listen to some great stats information from Rick Kosiba. My name is Murph Krajewski. I am the Senior VP of Marketing at Sharpen. I'm just really playing host for Rick today, which is a great honor. I love to hear Rick talk, and I love to see the data that he's coming up with. So we got some great stuff to share. I'm going to let Rick take it from here primarily. I might chime in if I feel like it a little bit later through the thing. If you've got any questions along the way, feel free to use the question panel there in your little GoToWebinar pop-out. I'll be watching those, and we'll make sure to address those as we go as well. All right, with no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Rick Kosiba.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Murph, if there's any questions that you think are timely, by all means interrupt me and let's talk about that. In general, especially when I'm talking to folks like you, the discussion is really the interesting part. So, feel free to shoot a note or something, especially if there's something that you think I'm getting a little bit wrong. But I want to thank you all for taking time with us today. So what we're going to talk about today, let me see if I got to click on some stuff. Hold on. There we go. All right, there we go. So what we're going to talk about today are analytics associated with managing a remote workforce. My hope here is to talk a bit about Sharpen, but given that most of you folks are consultants, my goal is to show you some sort of consultancy tricks, some fun with math. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some simple data and try to glean some sorts of cool insights from it. I do want to chat about performance management, which I think is critical with an at-home workforce. And again, I will show you some sort of fun with math tricks. Okay. All righty. When this whole COVID thing started, one of the very first things that we did is we were going through the process of helping our customers move to work at home. And one of the first things that we did is we, at the end of that, that first week, we sent out a small survey, and we asked them a couple questions, just two questions. One of which was, how long did it take you to transition to work at home? And it was really interesting because we expected that a lot of folks were going to be having trouble, and what we found is virtually, in our little survey, 88% of the folks basically said it took them less than 3 days. Most of the folks took less than one. And everybody was really thankful. Everybody was, really pumped about it. I think everybody was nervous about it. For those, those who have been in the call center industry, there's always been a small niche of people who work at home. Some companies embrace it, but it's a very, very small amount of them. And what we found is that people were, found it pretty easy to switch to at home. The other thing we asked them is how hard was it to actually manage your work at home agents? And a good chunk, again, basically said it's about the same, or it's about the same and better. We're at the same sort of percentage points there, which says that work at home really isn't that big a deal to most of our customers. We've been throughout this whole COVID thing. Maybe it's because we're also a little bit bored at home, but we've been going way out of our way to talk to as many customers as possible about this, and the theme has been consistent. People are finding it easy to work at home, which is really great. But what that does is it does obviously change something. I think we all know this, right? Which is that we do have a bit of a new normal going on. This is not going to go away. Think about it. If you were managing a call center with, say, 500 seats or so, you have to rent a big building. You have to have all that technology and those desks. You have to pay for all of this stuff. And now that everybody's seen that they can send their employees home and that it's not that big a deal, they can manage them. What they're going to find is that it's really hard to go back. Okay, agents like working at home. Those big contact centers with those 500 seats actually are pretty expensive. And so I'd hate to be in the commercial real estate business right now, because more and more folks are going to go make this permanent. It's funny, Murph and I this morning were talking to one of our really smart customers, and he basically said that this is the new normal. The quote that was fun was, I actually talk to my agents more now than I did when I was in the office because I'm forced to, and I'm forced to make a schedule to talk to everybody, which is really cool. All righty. There's some things that I'm going to show you something here. This is something that's relatively new within Sharpen, but it's something that a lot of companies have. It's it's a very small performance management piece, and it's a very simple concept, um, which is how do I go about the whole idea behind it is how do I get agents to manage themselves to a large degree? And the most obvious thing you can do is you can actually show them their performance, show it to them often, and tell them what's important to management, and then let them go with it. So this is a powerful tool for managing your work at home team. It's a powerful tool for managing your team, even if they were in the office. But the way that it works within Sharpen is very simple, which is every time that an agent gets off a contact, I finish a call, I get done typing out and sending out my chat session or whatever it is. As soon as it's done, what happens is my calculations, my metrics get recalculated, and they show on my screen, so I can always see what my performance is. In this case, there's three performance tiles. We're calling them performance tiles. And I can see what my average handle time is here compared to the goal. I can see where I am relative to my peers. And there's some other things here. So the idea here is that the customer gets to choose 3 metrics. These are the things that are most important to that specific customer. And they get to choose what their goals are. They get to choose whether or not to show them the ranking. But the whole idea is that an agent will see this and hopefully be motivated by it. Now, I actually don't have any. I don't think I have any. Oh, I do have some of the quotes. I'll show you some quotes in just a bit. So anyway, very simple concept. What happens when you do this? The other thing that you need, though, is you need the ability to show managers what the agents are saying. So again, this is the very simplest of performance management you can get, right? Show them their performance and show the supervisors their performance as well. So what we do is we take the metrics that are in these performance tiles, and we give the managers the ability to sort by it and see who's doing best, who's doing worse. Is there some sort of weird outliers? If you notice here, now this is fake data, but this person has a 22-second talk time. I would start listening to that person and make sure that they're not gaming our system a little bit, right? But anyway, the point of the matter is that the supervisors get to see what the agents see. And the most important thing here is that it becomes a self-manager for agents. Okay. Now here's the real fun stuff, which is as we were rolling this out, and this is part of the general Sharpen package, right? When you buy Sharpen, you get this. What we started to do is we started to keep track of the customer's performance, and we saw something really cool. So in this particular case, this is a credit union based out in the West, and the funny story is I was watching three of their tiles, one of them which was handle time, which is the one I focused on because I thought, handle time would be the thing that agents can affect most, right? And I was watching handle time and I wasn't seeing it improve, Finally, I called the manager and said, hey, your handle time isn't improving. Is there, anything you can do to sort of light a fire under your agents and get them working? And he came back to me and said, no, I told them not to look at handle time at all. Even though the metric is showing on their screen, I told them to focus 100% on first call resolution. And lo and behold, as soon as I started looking at that data, from the moment they turned the tiles on, their first call resolution and by extension their CSAT scores went through the roof, much higher than they'd ever gotten before. The quotes on the left are kind of telling, which is, we've got a couple people who are pushing 85% first call resolution. They're pretty excited about it because they thought I was crazy for suggesting that they could actually get above 80% and that it was possible. And lo and behold, they're hitting it, right? The one quote that I love about performance management here on the right-hand side, which is from an agent. This is relayed to us by one of the supervisors. And he said, I just have to say that the numbers on Sharpen make me want to be better than whoever may be ahead of me each day. I can't believe that I'm 8th on contact resolution. I will try harder. And that's the real cool part about it is small improvements in each agent's performance obviously leads to a better overall operational performance. And we're seeing that here. This particular case, I'm following their data, to this day, and it's holding up. They're getting 5. Another group they have is getting 6% improvement in first call resolution. And by extension, because we all know this, is that this means, in effect, that they're getting over a 5 or 6% improvement or reduction in call volume because people don't have to call back twice, which is really cool. Next one, I want to show you another one. This is just a result of the performance management stuff. This is really cool because it shows again the power of basically letting agents know that you're sort of watching their important metrics. This is a large software company who is actually doing some, their business actually spiked during COVID because the nature of their business was helping people who work at home. And what they saw was that their wrap-up time changed, dramatically in percentage terms, not dramatically in terms of seconds because it's going from 36 down to 30 seconds. But what is neat about this graph is the day they turn the performance tiles on, it's obvious. You can't look at this graph on the left-hand side and not think that this is a behavior change. This is a little harder to see, this hold time behavior change. It's a little harder to see if you're just looking at the graph, but when you run your numbers, they actually turn out to be better. And again, this is holding up in the last couple of weeks as well. So they're seeing an improvement in 10 seconds of hold time. Now, here's the thing that's really cool. Not as obvious again, but there was a dramatic improvement in handle time as well. So this is where the rubber meets the road. If I can reduce my handle times by 12%, right? This is 1.5 minutes per call, while maintaining CSAT, by the way. This is a big deal. And, 12% reduction in handle time for this particular company with their scale results in about an 8% reduction in staffing required. Now, they didn't lay anybody off. They, in the end, they took it in service level. They actually improved their service levels because of it, which everybody's really happy about. I bet for most of you, this is not super big news. Everyone knows that performance management works, right? It's something that companies are out there selling this stuff. It's what we found is that smaller companies typically don't buy it. It's the big companies who will dabble in it. And many of these companies, there's a few companies who are doing really well, and some of them are not doing particularly well because they're finding that their niche has got to be the big guys, right? But the point of the matter is that it obviously works. And here's the more important thing: what we've put in place here, that's again, as soon as anybody buys Sharpen, it's sitting there on their screen, is a very, very simple version of it. And that simple version has big results. I actually spoke with a number of performance management companies in the past, and they all say the same thing, which is you get 95% of the benefit from simply showing agents their metrics, which is, we're all in the analytics biz, and that makes perfect sense. The other thing that we wanted to do here is we're starting to develop some analytics. Sharpen has this really great system or tool within it, which exposes our data. So we have this great way of getting at our data and developing dashboards and reports and all that sort of stuff. Again, it just comes with our platform. And so what we are starting to work on, and I'm pulling data right now to do a lot of this analysis and make this part of our normal dashboards, is we're trying to answer very specific questions. And they're things like, what are my customers experiencing? How are my agents doing? What's their sentiment? How are my agents and supervisors performing together? So it's not just customers, it's the agents and the supervisors. What's my operational performance? How's my call center running? Are we efficient? Those kinds of things. And so what we would like to do is sort of create a cockpit by which the executive and the managers of the contact centers can simply monitor, their operations, sort of like, what we all dream NASA is like. You have these big screens and all this great information, but more than just simple dashboards that's saying, here's how my operation is operating right now, or, to date. We really want them to be able to do some really cool high-level analytics. And I want to show you some of the simpler ones, sort of fun with number stuff. Now, here's a simple graph. In effect, what we're doing is we're plotting. In this case, this is handle time for one of our customers' agents, and we're plotting it from fastest to slowest. It's a relatively small group, but it's fastest to slowest. We're just taking that table that we did and we're sorting it and then plotting it. And the reason why I want to do this is because it is sort of a trick. The shape of the curve is actually really interesting. If the shape of the curve is flat, and this one is actually reasonably flat over the sort of middle ground, um, it's likely that you can't affect performance particularly much. So the folks who are in the middle here between agents, say 10 and 20, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room here, right? And if that's the case, it means that there's not a whole lot that you can do with those folks. Now the folks on this right-hand side, obviously you can. So let me show you just a little trick here, which is you can actually, by looking at this, you can find an obvious point. The people to the right, probably of about 20 and over, these are folks that you can actually pull aside and train. Now, one of the cool things that you can do is with this graph is you can actually look at the area under that curve. I sort of approximated it with that triangle there. And that actually represents the ROI, the benefits in terms of agent hours or agent minutes of time that you could recoup if you were to actually bring these people up to the average or up to your goal. So you can actually look at this curve and say, you know what, if I didn't have that peak on the right-hand side, I could actually, if it was relatively flat, I could turn to this and say, you know what, I'm not going to get much benefit by doing additional training unless I can move the whole the whole curve down. But in terms of finding my worst agents and making them a lot better, here's the upper bound sort of the upper bound on improving their performance. So it gives you sort of an ROI associated with your training. Okay. So this is kind of neat, and you can use this little simple tool just to see whether or not it's even worth its while. Another thing you can do though is you can look at this and figure out what the attributes of your best employees are, right? I know who my best ones are here. Now it's time to start listening to their calls and figuring out whether there's some best practices there and those sorts of things. If this was a curve that was straight across, you might want to look at it and say, hey, am I noticing that the folks with most experience are on the left-hand side of this curve and my newest people are on the right-hand side? If that's the case, you can accelerate the people on the right-hand side, their improvement by maybe doing some training or some sit-withs with the better agents, those kinds of things. So it's kind of a neat little trick. I have another one of these right here, which is this is talk time. Same sort of thing. This curve looks really, looks different because this curve is, a little bit flatter. Again, this might be one of those cases where seniority actually matters. And if so, then maybe you can have the agents on the right-hand side sit with the agents on the left-hand side and sort of work through ways to improve. Righty. Let me go to the next slide. This is also a little interesting. You can use this sort of graph, and actually I'm working on doing some sort of attributes of agents sort of stuff. What we're plotting here is on the x-axis, we're plotting handle time for each contact, and on the y-axis, we're plotting the number of calls within a 24-hour period. Okay, so just simply, did the person have to call back? And what you can get to is something interesting, which is it sort of tells you what the burden is of your contact centers on very specific customers. So the people who are in this sort of gray area, these are the people with the extremely long handle times. Or these are, as you go up, these are the people with the shorter handle times, but they call us back a lot. And here we have a short handle time, but this person called me 9 times. Okay, there's something wrong there. And you can actually listen in on those calls and sort of figure out, what are they calling me about? The idea here is you want to figure out why it is that this is happening. This could be a whole bunch of different things. It could be that our processes are messed up. It could be that our agents aren't trained. It could be that there's something in our offering that is just simply complex, and we just, this is what it takes. But the way you get this is by listening to these types of contacts and figuring out the ones that cost me the most. How do we go about fixing those things? Okay. Here's another view of that sort of data, which is you can actually look. In this case, my dogs are barking. This is the number of callbacks within a 3-day period. And our customers, we do use first call resolution. We actually call it active call resolution, which represents how many times did they call me within some time period. It could be 1, 3, 5, 7, I think right now, or 1, 3, 7. In this particular case, we're looking at 3-day callback period. The interesting thing is with this particular graph is this shows you the ROI of fixing it. So if I were to take those more complex calls, or the people who call me back an awful lot more, I could look at these calls. 7% of all my calls. If I were to multiply them all out and have a weighted average by time, I would expect that this would be much higher. As a matter of fact, I did do it in somewhere around 10 or 12% of the calls. So, or 10 or 12% of the agent hours that I'd be fixing by doing something about these particular calls. So it's a way of looking at the data and trying to figure out the things that you can do to improve. As a consultant, this is one of those fun things that you can, glean from their data. Go ahead and get a data dump, start looking at these, and you'll find ROI all over the place simply by paying attention. What is a funny story? I was working with I was staying with my mother. My job's in Indiana, and I live in Maryland, and so my parents live in Indiana. So I was staying with them and driving into the office before COVID. And my mom gave somebody her password to her email and her iPhone and all sorts of stuff. And so I was running around calling people. And when I called her cable company who had her email, that was the one I was most worried about, because that's how they validate whether or not you've got the right ID. It took me 7 phone calls and 3 texts before they were ever able to get to solve my problem, just to get me to change the password. Something that you would think would be simple, they were not able to do it. But I wondered at the time, does anybody in this at this company, is there any exec that knows that they took 10 contacts for them to fix my problem? Because I was on the phone with somebody for 4 hours. When I added it all up, 4 hours or so that evening. They should know this, and they should have been able to listen in, say, hey, I can't handle Rick's password request. There's got to be something we can do, training or some sort of message to the agents on how to fix this. All right, this is one of the more fun things that we're working on right now. It's not in our product yet, but the idea here is something I think is going to be pretty powerful. We consider ourselves the agent-first company. We really focus on building stuff for the agents, whether that's, like we showed, self-management or, having a very simple to use user interface. All that sort of stuff is always built from the perspective of the agent. One of the things we're working on is a simple thing, which is when they log out, when they go to break, there's certain events throughout the day, it will simply say, hey, how you feeling? Or, do you feel like you have the tools required to do your job well? Or, just a few things. But the idea is we want to get some sort of agent sentiment stuff. This is neat. You can see my scribbles here. This is what we're building. At some point, I'm going to have real data here. What it allows you to do is some really cool analytics. If you look on the right-hand side, for example, here you have happiness. I don't know what the squiggle is either, but basically it's the happiness by supervisor, agent sentiment by supervisor. This is something that's really cool. You can actually know that there's trends here. And let's say my supervisor 3 is much lower than the others. Well, I got a training issue with my supervisor 3. You don't quit your job, you quit your boss, right? What we need to do is do something to help improve agent sentiment in supervisor 3's group. We have seen data like this, which is happy agent against happy customer. Since we are actually keeping track of customer sentiment, plot that against agent sentiment, and you'll see it yourself, a nice little curve. We don't have that. The one on the bottom right is one of my all-time favorites, and I think this is sort of cool because it talks about what I'm plotting here is service level against happiness of the agent. Okay, I spent a lot of time in the workforce management area, and workforce managers sort of have this rule of thumb, which says, in my company, we want to shoot for a service level of something and an occupancy of something else because we don't want to burn out the agents. I've never seen any data on it as to, for example, here, if I'm plotting service level against happiness, we would expect, I haven't seen the data, but I would expect on this lower end, when service levels are low, that means that your occupancies are extremely high. You're burning out your agents here. These guys they hang up the phone and they've got another call right then and there. You want to, this would be neat to know how bad that is. At the same time, on the right-hand side, it's your agents are idle, very, very idle. Do agents like that? Maybe they do, but I would expect that they don't. You would expect that somewhere there's a sort of middle ground where agents are happy, the pace of the work is good, and they can, they walk out of it feeling okay, like they're both productive, but not overworked. So it'd be neat for every company to actually plot this. And the way that you get this is by going through this exercise of just checking to see how they're doing. Um, I want to say that's I'm down to 2 minutes left here of what I had prepared. So I'd love to know what your questions are or what your thoughts are. I think this stuff is sort of fun. It's sort of the fun with the numbers and such. It's not that any of this stuff is groundbreaking, but it is certainly cool to be able to have it in an accessible form for your management team. Murph, do we have any questions?
Well, we had a couple come in that I was able to just kind of answer off to the side. They were kind of logistical questions, but there was one thing that I was curious about getting your thoughts on in terms of are these things like a magic wand? Can you just like flip a switch and turn on some stats and then everything gets better? Or like, what else in terms of management or change management is required?
That's great question. And the answer is, of course, you can't. As a matter of fact, we have seen situations where they did flip them on, but nobody really talked about it. It has to be part of an overall process, and the process is something like, let's talk about implementing. You want to tell all the agents that you're about to do this, and you're choosing these metrics because these metrics lead to the efficiency of the operation, and they're important to me, and they're important to the big bosses, and we're watching it, and we're going to have discussions about it and such. And you let agents do their thing, you're monitoring them, and you send kudos to the guys who are doing well. You sit and coach the folks who are not doing well. A funny story I heard. I was talking to a customer. This is when I first started at Sharpen, and we were talking about doing some of this performance management stuff. We're just thinking about it. So I was bouncing it off a customer, and I said, here's what we're talking about building, and he said, this is great. This happened to me once. So he's telling this story, and the story goes something like this, which is I was looking at agent performance, and we had one of our agents was a severe underperformer. His handle times were extremely high. He was so much less efficient than most of my other agents. And so I called him into the office because I was putting him on a performance plan. We're looking to let this guy go because he was so much slower than everyone else. And the conversation went something like this. Okay, agent so-and-so, we've noticed that your handle times are extremely high. And he said, what are they? He says, you are 3 times as long as everyone else. He went, really? He said, and the supervisor goes, yes, this is a cause for concern. The guy goes, oh, I didn't know that that's what you're looking for. I'll fix it. Went back to his desk, and from then on, he had handle times like everyone else. So some of this is letting, when you look at those tiles, it's telling your agents what's important to you. It's looking at them and it's a statement as to what is important to management, right? If I put metrics in front of them, I'm telling them that I think that these metrics are important to us as an organization. So it's step one is you prep them for the tiles or prep them for whatever metrics you're showing them, let them do their thing, you monitor them, you come back around and you use it in coaching and in management, and you use it in all the team meetings. It's something that you have to pay attention to, and then agents will as well. Everybody wants to do well. There's a quote, Murph, this may have been you who said it, but it was something like, a happy agent is someone who knows that they're doing well and knows that other people are doing well too, or other people know that they're doing well too. Sort of like
Dude, that's your quote. You
shut up,
said
it was
that.
yours.
I stole it
Dude,
from
take
you.
credit.
Hey, we did get another great question. So someone is wondering if we recommend starting off with a pilot group of agents, and are the metrics that we display, are they agent specific? Are they queue specific? How do they roll up?
Yeah, that's a great question. They can be a whole bunch of different ways. And I'm not talking about Sharpen. In general, there's a whole bunch of different ways you could want to configure them. As a matter of fact, Murph and I and some other folks were talking to that same customer, and that was one of his questions. He wanted to know other ways to configure it because it makes sense to configure different ways. There are some issues associated, for example, with configuring on the queue level. And the issues are most agents handle multiple queues. This particular customer of ours was handling 30. So the agents would handle 30 queues or so, maybe more. So you think about it is if I have a different goal on each queue, certainly I can't show the agents how they're performing on each queue. What I can do is I can maybe roll them up. But even rolling them up makes it a little bit difficult in that they may be getting a different combination of those things. But either way, the way that we do it is we do sort of map every agent to one specific, we call them user group. And it's basically what if I'm in the customer service team, then here's my customer service. All the queues of customer service queues come to this team, and they work together. So they're basically expected to do the same things. So that's the way we're setting it up today. There are other ways of doing it as well. So and to a lot of you folks, I know you live and breathe this stuff, but the way you configure your contact center may necessitate that you set up your user groups or however you want to organize it for performance management differently. But in general, I think the whole idea is customer service has their scores. My sales group has different scores. They have different metrics and different goals.
So we had another good one come in. This is a math question. Are you ready?
I'm in.
You love the math questions. What method do we use to measure first call resolution? I'll say first contact, but first call resolution.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we thought about this. First contact resolution or first call resolution is this is the end of our sort of going to the whiteboard and trying to beat it up a little bit. It seems to be or it is an organization metric. It's not necessarily a human being metric or an agent metric. And the reason is because agents don't control whether they're getting the first call or the 40th call. When I was calling that cable company, I talked to 7 people right on the phone, and the 7th person helped me out. But the first 6 did not. So in our parlance, we're actually changing the term for the agent from first call resolution to active call resolution. What it basically says is that when I'm on the phone with somebody, I will take care of their problem, and they don't have to call me back. So we put a time horizon on it. Like I said, 1 day, or I think it's 1 day, 3 day, 7 day. And if I'm looking at 1 day, what it means that if I hang up the phone with the customer, if they call back within 24 hours, the result of my contact with them was not positive. So that's a negative. If they don't call back within 24 hours, it means that I saved, I handled what was important to handle, and they didn't need to call us back. So we figured that was the cleanest metric. We do understand that there's some edge cases around it where, the interaction is just a little bit more complex and they're going to have to call back. But we figured that and it depends upon the type of operation, obviously. But we figured that everybody would get their fair share of those types of contacts, and they can affect the other ones better.
So a follow-up question onto that from someone else said that kind of stuff looks great from a management perspective, but have we seen any pushback from the agents about the real-time monitoring?
I'm gonna answer in the negative. Generally, the result has been pretty positive, but the reason I'm going to pass this back to Murph is because Murph, did you ever get we sent out a survey to some of these agents to see what they thought about it, and I saw a screenshot of it. I didn't see the whole thing. There's some people who didn't like certain things about it, but Murph, do you remember any of from our meeting this morning, any of the results that were negative?
Yeah, I don't remember the particular comments of the negatives, but I remember the breakdown of neutral or positive was 87% and the negative was 13%. And
right.
Because we're beta testing, he did tell us that most of the negative sentiments were from people who, had a login error or, something was just showing its beta code. So overwhelmingly, it's been positively received. And we have gotten some pointed comments back from people who said, I can't believe I'm 8th in my group. I'm going to do better tomorrow. Or, just the kind of human competitive streak that people get, not necessarily from competing with others, but from competing with themselves too. So far, like we're being very careful to monitor for signs of agent health and well-being in the process of doing all of this.
Yeah, yeah. When you talk to the management team, we have yet to hear anything really negative about it. The management team loves it. We went out and spoke to, I don't know, 7 companies to see whether they do, would you consider doing a beta? And 100% of them said, yes, I'd like to do a beta, which is great.
We had another really good question about how we're measuring based on channel, and I'm pretty sure right now we're rolling all channels together into the single like handle time or resolution metric. Are we not?
That's a good question, and no, we simplified it and we kept the beta anyway to phone call. Okay. In the future, we're going to have to do something else, and I'll bounce this off you folks. I'm curious what you think. One of the ideas that we're toying with is having different goals for each channel, right? And then the agent's specific performance is going to be tied to the distribution, see if it makes sense, distribution of how much of each channel they actually see. So for example, if I get 80% of my contacts are inbound calls and 20% are chat, well, I know chat is longer, so I will come up with a blended sort of performance goal for me personally because I'm 80-20. Whereas if Murph is at 50% calls and 50% chat, well, chat takes longer, and so his goal will look different because he's seeing a different sort of blend of contacts. So we're toying with that. There's some obvious problems with that too, which is you can't sort of compare everybody to everybody. You can on each channel, but not independent. Or I'm sorry, not combined. So we're toying with, or the obvious other one is to simply have 6 tiles, right? One for your chats and one for your phone calls. But that gets complex too. So we're toying with different ways of calculating that.
I do like that we're in the beta, we're keeping it simple, and we're kind of focusing on how do human beings respond to a mechanism like this? What happens if we push this button a little bit? And there's still a lot of room for us to explore. What if we go by channel? What if we do by other user groups? What if we segment by users, et cetera, et cetera? So we can branch this out in a lot of ways. I think that'll be generally really, really helpful.
Just one other thing, Murph, is this is one, and you guys all have as much experience as I do, but I've been doing this for a long time. And I don't see that many cases of really, really blended companies. You don't typically, the people who are good at chat are not the people who are good at voice. And you do see blended inbound and outbound if they're collection centers, for example. But in general, it's still pretty segmented, and so there's we got to think about that as well.
Yeah. There's some other good thoughts coming in that are getting into the weeds, and so you know who you are. I'm going to set up a conversation with you and Rick. Let's just get those things. I'm not going to try to use the question and answer mechanism to get through all that stuff. And I'm looking at the clock. We're like 11 minutes over. People are still here, and so if there are more deeper questions, feel free to toss them in. I don't have anything on my calendar for the next few minutes. Rick, if you've got more time to engage.
Go to the top of the hour.
But I will say this, if you've got questions or curiosities, you heard us say that a big part of the success of this program has been the rollout and the management and the advisement around it. And this is where I think the consultant community has a unique perspective and a unique opportunity to help us with this. One of our favorite parts about it is that we're rolling it out as a part of our core platform. It's really the beginning part of where we think when we're developing our tools. So it's not an add-on. It's not a, gosh, if I was a big enough company or if we had made enough money, I'd love to add it. This is a part of who we are. So we would love to get engagement from this community on your experience, on problems that you're trying to solve. Help us figure out if we're going about it the right way or if you've got some advice. All of those things, we've got Marcia. You know how to get in touch with Marcia, and she'll get conversations set up. I just think there's a lot of ground that this group can help us cover very quickly and bring some real change to a longstanding issue. Sorry, I kind of railroaded your webinar, Rick.
No, 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 not absolutely
I
not.
got on
But
my
I,
soapbox there.
yeah, you're so. Oh, well, I get on soapboxes too. The I think Murph is exactly right, and we could use help. And like I said, we didn't invent this space. What we're trying to do is democratize it in some way, which is
Hmm.
when you look at the distribution of people who have and use performance management in sort of a automated way, people who buy performance management software, it's very skewed toward the high end. It's not skewed, the low end folks or the sort of middle market. There aren't that many of those folks, and they can, if they buy Sharp, and they get it.
Great. All right, Rick, this has been a fascinating look. I love it when you get out the graphs and start talking through the numbers. My mind just goes 100 miles an hour. Everybody who stayed with us for this long, thank you very much. We're going to have the recording of it. We'll make it available to you in some follow-up stuff. So if you didn't scratch down notes fast enough, you can always go back and refer to it. And again, as usual, if you would love to be a part of our consultant program, visit the brand new sharpencx.com. We just rolled out a new website this week. So we'd love to have you give us some feedback on that as well. And that's it. That's what we got. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, folks.